There are a lot of annoying things about this job.
I would say maybe annoying is like what we feel in the moment. In fact, these are features of the
It's not a
UX
bug,
job.
it's a feature.
Basically, there are many situations that we come across as UX designers in our daily jobs, whether you're new to this or not, that make it a challenge to do the work outside of the screen.
We sat down to come up with a whole list of things that we consider to be key problems that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. It was a long list.
But we whittled it down to 3 critical things. Those are key stakeholder might not be making decisions quickly enough.
You're not getting access to users or research that you'd like to do with users.
And lastly, there are so many competing stakeholders, each with their own conflicting interests. And somehow you're the one responsible for addressing all those things. So what we want to talk about today is the situations we've come across that were like that, how we worked around them, and ultimately we want to share what we think were best practices that helped unblock those situations in our careers. You've shown your boss a whole bunch of prototypes, and now management can't decide what direction the product should go in. I feel like this is a super classic situation where you've done your part, you've presented the prototypes or the user flows or whatever it is that you were tasked to do, and all of a sudden, silence. Management's stuck.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a very good point. It's like your job as a designer is to facilitate decision making. If your prototypes aren't doing that, then there's a problem.
Right.
You have to adjust. You have to come up with ways to kind of really get the decision past the finish line, you know? And one of the best ways to do that is to, one, limit the number of prototypes you're showing. Make sure that those prototypes have very clear delineations. You know, like I think you used a great analogy one time that each prototype should be like a chapter title of a book.
It should have a name, because talking about prototypes or user flows or even features in a product can be very abstract. Like, oh, do I want commenting in this social media app? Or, oh, do I want the ability to draw in this thing? And rather than have it be like, oh, the one with the commenting, it can be like, okay, like let's talk about the aggressive commenting prototype versus the, passive nudging prototype, right? And then that way you have these directions and you can steer it. Because I guess what we're not really touching on is, why is management stuck, right? Like, why does this problem arise?
Yeah.
And I think it's twofold. Obviously, sometimes you could have a team that's undecided. Maybe the vision of the company wasn't set correctly. But sometimes also the designers take too much of a backseat role of like, you asked me to make your work, put the pixels together, I chose the icons, now you tell me.
Yeah.
But in fact, especially if you're interested in becoming more than just like an individual contributor in a company, if you want to move up into design leadership, you do need to assume some level of responsibility around facilitating the decision.
Yeah, and you have to have opinions, you know what I mean? You have to show those opinions through your work. And I think opinions are great, especially in the context of a prototype, because it really gives management something to react to. You know, if there's not enough distinction between your different prototypes, like let's say you're just moving around a button,
right?
You're not kind of naming them super different things, and you give like 5 to 8 options. You've just really kind of clouded and muddied the decision-making possibilities. And even if you say present 3 prototypes and none of them resonate, at least you'll be having good conversations around each one.
Yes. That's actually, that's critical. Like the opinions thing, man.
Yeah.
Maybe it's also my personality. It drives me nuts when somebody's just so passive. Oh, these are all good options.
Yeah.
Really? I mean, they can all be good options, but like, what is good? Good for what? In what context? Did you align on any of them with dev? Like, there are so many facets to this that you can be proactive about to help facilitate management. They might still ignore you.
Yeah.
But you've done your part in helping unblock them. And then if they want to go with the option that maybe is not your favorite, it's not a big deal.
Totally.
Right? That's not what that's about. It's about unblocking.
Yeah. I think the second biggest thing, which many UX designers struggle with, is getting access to users for research purposes. I know you've experienced that a lot. I know I've experienced that a lot. But there's a few key factors to think about,
Right. I'm experiencing it live. I just can't say where. But there's actually, I would say one of the biggest things with this is sometimes people don't understand what research means. So when you go to a dev or when you go to a manager and you're like, I want to do some research. There's
Scary.
It's like, what?
Research? Oh, we need some grants. You have to be associated with a university.
Right. No, but I think you're right. I think especially, and I think this is especially true when you work with big corporations who are used to everything needing a big proposal and a request and a budget approval. And so they think, oh God, now we're going to delay the project by months as we do this big study. But user research can be talking to 5 to 8 users. It can be showing 100%. A prototype to sometimes a few people internally. And so the biggest thing here, besides explaining that research doesn't have to be this big thing,
trying to justify it at some point. But if you can't,
I would say the next best thing is, one, ask yourself, how much research do I really need right now? Am I just trying to push research because that's what they taught me at school? Or that was the dogma of my previous context where we had to do research over every button and over every,
Yeah.
So, figure out is this research necessary? And then if yes, and you still can't get approval, then what are the second best options?
Yeah.
Best practices. We're big fans of that.
Your own research.
Your own research, look up say you're building a calendar app, look at Google Calendar, look at Teams Calendar, look at iCal. iCal sucks. But take what you want from those and then show them to your colleagues.
Totally.
One thing that we just did a couple of days ago actually is we called someone up who was a UX designer in another company without revealing the nature of our project. We just asked them for their advice on how they handled the context that was similar.
Yeah.
So
I mean, obviously there's NDAs and stuff like that, but if you can even just ask your other fellow UXers, maybe you studied with, maybe you've worked with in the past, kind of just general questions to kind of challenge your thinking, it's super useful.
Right. One really big thing that comes up a lot is having multiple stakeholders with different needs and constraints. So you have your dev teams who don't want to spend too much time coding something that might be unnecessary or experimental. You have management who wants to cut costs on all fronts, often. You have sales and marketing who need something that looks sexy, that needs to meet their targets.
Yeah.
And you have opinions.
Yeah.
Just opinions. Could be your fellow designers, could be whoever.
Totally.
How do you handle all those competing constraints, right? It's a tough one. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, okay. I think one of the biggest things I've learned in my career as a product designer is be friends with the technical team.
Yeah.
Not that anyone else is less important, but the technical team is very important. They're the people who are fundamentally executing on what you've designed. And learning their limitations, learning what they like, kind of getting their input even is really important to kind of building that relationship between the technical and design team.
Hey, you've done dev work for a living.
Yeah.
What do you have a way what are things that help facilitate that?
I mean, I think the first thing is showing your work early on. Devs are really, devs are not designers, they are developers for sure. But they have a lot of design knowledge because they're always executing on designs and they actually see the things live. So they have a lot of opinions about, and oftentimes they're really great because they're implementing things about finding the little states that we as designers always forget for some reason. Even if you have a checklist, you're always going to forget something because they have to actually type it out in a line of code. You know? So they're really great for finding those things, but also just making them feel involved in the process is a really meaningful way to get your work done. And also being generous with your designs. And what I mean by that is just considering their skill sets, and not trying to push design in such a radical way that, it fucks up their day. Straight up fucks up their day. They have to okay, now instead of working 3 hours, I have to work 8 hours and it's going to take me 2 days.
Right. Including them early also gives you meaningful constraints, right? Yeah. You'll start to know not to go too far in some cases. I mean, sometimes you need to ignore technical constraints.
Yeah.
I would say the other one that's really, really important is keeping especially management or whoever you're reporting to, whether it's a client or a boss, keeping them current with what you're thinking and doing.
Yeah.
So that like you're not coming to them with a shock at the end and then they feel like like they're not being heard. Marketing and sales as well, get their requirements early on. And understand, I think this is also critical, that part doesn't get too much better with experience. I think it gets easier for you to process the difficulty of it, but I don't think it ever becomes something that you've mastered.
Yeah.
So I would say like maybe the best advice here is like, obviously like aligning and doing all those tricks early, but also keep in mind that that's never going to go anywhere. And so you have to get comfortable with it, or you might be in the wrong job, honestly. Because unlike maybe other types of design, say illustration, where like you're given a task, you're given a vibe, and you can go off and do it. Technical constraints aren't the same. There's no user who needs to fiddle with it. So you have to get comfortable with that and then manage it with all those techniques.
I think one of the things that you're saying also that's kind of nice is just get used to working in the open. Get used to opinions coming in maybe at the wrong time, and that's okay. You know what I mean? Just work in the open, deal with the opinions, and be confident about when they really matter.
Yeah.
Obviously, there are a lot of different kind of specific problems that we can talk about in the field of product design. But these are 3 things that we found across the board in a startup, in a larger corp, working as a freelancer. These are things that you're going to have to manage.
And if you've come across any experiences of your own that you feel like we haven't touched on in this video, please leave them in the comments below. We love to read them and learn from you guys. And as always, thank you for tuning in. Subscribe to keep up with our channel, and we'll see you in the next one.
Cheers.